Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Iori Folarin. Good to be back from a shortish kind of a vacation. Okay, but swinging straight into it, Saturday, the news arrived that the Election Petition Tribunal, Governorship Election Petition Tribunal concerning River State, had handed down its decision, and that was that there would be a rerun, that there were substantial non-compliances with the Electoral Act. And that's the judicial way in which they put it. But as you recall, going back to the April 11 election, international and local observers had opined that hardly any election took place here. In fact, they said no election took place in some areas of River State. Election, as we know the term. So here we have it, and now that that decision has been handed down, it does begin to beg a lot of questions. So what next? What's going to happen? Of course, there will be appeals, and then they'll go on as far as they can go. And indeed, the current governor, who it depends on what side of the law, how you're looking at the law. If you're a non-learned person like me, you might say that, well, if they pronounced that the election was flawed, therefore, that man was never governor, but they say it doesn't quite work like that. There are, processes. As long as he appeals, he's going to remain the governor. So we'll look at this, that, look, my guest, one of two guests that we'll be having today, Mr. Clem Baye. He's a policy analyst. Thank you very much for coming on, Clem. And as it were, resuming with me.
Yes, resuming with you. You're welcome from vacation.
Indeed, thank you very much. And we'll be joined later on by Malaki Ugumadu. Barrister Ugumadu is a lawyer. He's a civil rights activist. In fact, he's now the president of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, but that's another story. Malaki will be joining us for the legal aspects of the procedures, help us understand these procedures, because it's going to be a long, drawn-out matter, even though, thankfully, there are constraints on both the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. They have these constraints in terms of days within which they must deliver their judgment. But, Clem, were you surprised? Because I've been hearing from some people reading the press that, I'm not surprised at all that it came to this. There are other people that are saying that this is a gang up and this will not stand. How did you receive the news?
Well, neither. I mean, I'm for truth and justice to prevail. So I would like to believe in the integrity of the, tribunal. Except again when a superior judgment comes that is different from this one, and then right up to the Supreme Court. Mine is just, let's be fair to everybody, whether PDP or APC, I do not think that tainted electoral victory is worth it anymore in this country. And if it were, as the tribunal has ruled thus far, that was tainted, to that extent, it is welcome.
It comes back to what people have described, and I'm not necessarily talking about River State in particular here, but elections generally in Nigeria. It comes back to what some people have referred to as a sort of desperation, undue desperation on the part of political gladiators to be successful. I mean, it's not as if it's the end of the world, but that's not the understanding that most political contestants have in Nigeria.
Absolutely, Yori. I mean, here, people would kill or be killed in the process of an electoral victory. When our democracy develops, you would see that people will start saying, please, don't rig for me. But here, if you rigged for me and I allowed it, I mean, I would be seen to be a very sensible person.
And that's the unfortunate part, because people are, first of all, we're getting commendation from around the world following the election, the general elections, that, look, Nigeria is coming. It's not quite there, but it certainly is moving.
It is not quite there, and let's not be too discouraged. These things take a while. It does take a while, because what the politicians do is to look for any loophole in the arrangement. And the lawyers, we have enough clever lawyers to make sure that there are as many loopholes as possible that are pointed out, and to make sure that the will of the people does not prevail. What I would be interested to see is that the actual will, the desire of the voter in Rivers State, that prevails. I don't care whichever party it is, it prevails. Of course, I do have views about the parties and the contestants, but that's apart from the fact that free, fair, credible.
And those three words, free, fair, credible, we should see them as indispensable to any electoral process, really. But when you look at what's going on in our society here, that doesn't seem to be the case. And I think it's a matter for regret, perhaps you'll agree, that elections are shifting from the field to the courts. And people seem to know that, look, this election we're doing here, don't worry, we're going to end up in court.
Absolutely. And while that is good for the lawyers that are going to make a killing financially from these things, it is not the best for us. But it is still better than settling it by violence and bloodshed.
Anarchy and all of that.
The reason why we have the judiciary as the arbiter in things is to give hope to especially the proverbial common man, that listen, there is a place where you go to, you don't just get a ruling, but you actually get justice. And you don't just get justice qua human terms, but you get justice that seems to be like a divine intervention. That is very important for us to continue to grow our democratic process. As I said, it's a process. We're working on it here and there. The Electoral Act has been reviewed. Before, the Speaker would have been asked to take over. But I think that the latest Electoral Act does not provide for that.
No,
it
allows notice of appeal.
Yes, when Malachi comes, he would take us through some of those things. But the sad thing is that it's a poor reflection on our political system and our political process that we have to continue to have judicial intervention. Way back in 1979, The Economist in London said Nigerians litigated their way to democracy. You know, there's so much litigation, and people would not stop. Even if possible, a councillor in local council would want his or her own appeal to go to the Supreme Court if it is allowed by law. And perhaps beyond the Supreme Court, maybe West African Court of Appeal when it does start working.
That's how tenacious people can be. Whatever side you're on of the divide you happen to be on, both are tenacious.
Because people deceive themselves. You'd see somebody, he cannot score more than 2 or 3 votes. He will say that everybody in his community has declared for him. So how do you get that except you go to the polls, which means that we are straining the system because we are coming to the electoral process with they say you come to equity with clean hands.
Yeah.
But if we were going to the electoral process to get equity, we're actually going with dirty hands.
Indeed.
Filthy hands, indeed.
When, as you pointed out, when Malachi comes, he'll help us through the legal aspects and provisions and procedures that are going to unfold. Yeah. But when you think about it, the whole concept, the whole concept of the people's will would appear to be a bit threatened by the way we go about our elections here. Additionally, I wonder what your comment is on the whole matter about it's getting, I think by now it's settled that you need very, very deep pockets if you're going to engage in any electoral, quest.
It's deep pockets, abysmally deep pockets, maybe as deep as the Caspian Sea.
And this is a problem because it unlevels the playing field.
It is too much. You are not, and look, when you have such deep pockets, you couldn't have made that money in a legitimate way. That the type of deep pockets that you need. Let's take, for instance, now, somebody whose relation won election to the House of Reps, House of Representatives, was telling another person, this is like a cousin. He said he, as an individual, spent 40 million naira. Now, not the candidate himself. Most of these people, by the time you're winning election, senator, House of Reps, I'm not even talking about governor, you must have spent upwards of 400, 500, 600 million naira. You remember that story of a member of the House of Reps that paid the chairman of a political party 750 million naira to aid his becoming a governorship candidate of a particular political party? Because it's not confirmed. I don't need to mention the name, but our viewers would have heard the story. Now, where would somebody get that type of money if he's actually with the sweat of his brow that he earns that sort of money?
And this is where you said earlier, and I agree with you, that look, rather the judicial process than anarchy out there in the streets to settle disputes. But if a person, you see, this is where vigilance, eternal vigilance, being the price of freedom and all of that, I begin to have problems with it, because look, if a small guy is the popularly preferred person, and the guy is a pauper. In these terms, he doesn't have more than maybe 10 million naira to his name. So that is why I said in these terms he's a pauper. That guy is out no matter how good his case. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to contend with for a while, probably.
I mean, see how many times General Muhammadu Buhari, now President Muhammad, he went to the polls. And how many times he went to the court. As he told somebody, he said he contested the election so many times, and he always ended up in the Supreme Court, because he went right up to the Supreme Court. Now, it may show tenacity. It may be good for the system that we had to go through that process, but it leaves a bitter pill to swallow.
And it cost a pretty penny.
And it costs a pretty penny. Now, those are funds that should have been used for development. If you look at Rivers State today, I dare say that what amount of governance has been taking place in Rivers State since this electioneering season? How much governance has been taking place? That's why I said, I obviously have a view as to the candidates, but on this platform, we have to be very fair. I don't think much governance took place in the last maybe 18 months. And I doubt the idea that any is going to take place for another 12 to 15 months until this whole issue is resolved. Anything that you see is just camera governance, just for people to see that things are taking place.
Because that's not where their focus is. Their focus is not on governance for now.
It's on the power.
It's on getting power.
And that is a great cost to the people of Rivers State. There are many issues that are begging for attention, which have not been given adequate attention. They may be given some attention, but some issues need more than adequate attention. And to that extent, the people's interest is not being well served by the issues that are happening.
Simply because the reason we elect people in is because of governance, nothing else.
It's because of governance. And that's why I say that if we want our democracy to improve, we must begin to say to people that don't give me money, don't give me bread, don't give me rice. What I want you to promise me is that you will make sure that I have access to clean water, I have access to good roads, that I'm a farmer, I have access to taking my farm gate my products to the farm gate or beyond the farm gate without losing 40 to 50% of my produce spoiled before it gets to the consumer. I would have thought, and that I have access to decent healthcare facilities, rather than saying, give me 500,000 naira and it's good for me, but not everybody can be given 500,000 naira. So I vote for you, I make sure that I cheat and I lie, I engage in all sorts of things to see that you become the winner.
Okay, well, Mr. Nyesom Wike, he is saying that he won the election fair and square, and that this ruling is a gang up, and that it won't stand, and all of that. And Mr. Dakuku Peterside is saying that that day has come that I always spoke about, that a blind man would have known on April 11 that this charade, as he put it, is not going to stand. Now, months later, we have an election petition tribunal, actually, as it were, agreeing with him in the first instance. Yes. There's still more legal battles.
There's a lot of legal battles. The Kuku Peter side, he said all those things. a lot of people said, you know, a lot of people agreed with him. But now the tribunal is more or less saying that, yes, so many things were wrong.
There are matters to investigate.
Yeah, there were matters that were certainly not right with this election, and therefore, to that extent, Wike is declared not the winner of the election.
Let's go back and look at that, where that Dakuku Peter side, what was it at the time? Prediction. It was the prediction on the very next day, from 11th of April.
We had to register our protest to convey the message that we did not vote yesterday because we arrived at our various polling booths across the state only to find out that there were no result sheets. And because there were no result sheets,
in all the local government areas,
at least 90%, save in parts of Port Harcourt and Obiabo, in all the rest local governments, there were no result sheets. And so the elections did not proceed. We heard later, through unconfirmed sources, that those result sheets appeared in various homes outside the designated ward and local government coalition centers, and that members of PDP were filling those forms. And we felt that if we don't register our protest, it might be mistaken that there were elections. In substance, there was no election anywhere in River State.
All right, sir. You had a press conference yesterday. One would have expected that probably you were going to wait for a response from INEC before doing this today.
Well, press conference itself was not is not the same thing as a petition. We have formally submitted the petition today to INEC.
in terms of, is it written or just this?
Written, documented.
That's the records.
It was received by the administrative secretary, a man who identified himself as administrative secretary of INEC River State.
All right, sir. At what time of the day can we expect this this gathering to disperse?
Well, our intention is to occupy here till tomorrow morning.
Is that feasible?
It is.
Okay, that's a flashback. That is the day after the elections, when the APC governorship candidate in River State, Dakuku Peter Said, said that he wasn't pleased at all with goings on. In fact, so much so that they were going to start the process that has, quite frankly, ended up at where we are today. And we've since been joined by Mr. Malaki Ugumadu, lawyer, rights activist, and as I said earlier, in his absence, new president of the Committee for Defense of Human Rights.
Thank you for that last introduction.
He has just been,
apologize,
you know, assumed that office. Thank you very much for coming on. And so, well, good time for you to join this conversation, Malaki. Now, could you just in brief, because I know you lawyers need to explain these things, could you in brief tell us what's going to happen now? There was a time when the handing down of the decision of the tribunal would have meant the man was no more governor. But there's been a revision to Electoral Act, so it's not quite like that. He still can remain governor, provided he serves notice to appeal.
Within 21 days.
Within 21 days.
Provided he did that within 21 days.
Okay. That is from Saturday.
And you are speaking to Section 143, Subsection 1 and 2 of the Electoral Act, 2010. Under the 2006 Electoral Act, which was the preceding Electoral Act before this one, none of such existed. In the same way and manner that...
At that time, sorry to interrupt, at that time, the Court of Appeal was the apex court.
That was apex court. No person talks about the Supreme Court except you are dealing with the presidential or vice presidential positions. Indeed, I heard my colleague when he said the appeals even went beyond the shores of this country towards courts. One Igbo, I've forgotten the name, but so it's work in progress. Are we there yet? Certainly not. Are we rejigging it? Yes, we are, drawing from concrete experiences. Chibike Amechi didn't contest elections when he became the governor of River State. A particular section in section 41 of the Electoral Act was introduced to deal with the exigency of that situation. The Supreme Court gave a wonderful judgment, but also was circumspect about entrusting in the judiciary the ultimate collective will of a people.
Absolutely.
And needed to have the people play the predominant role in expressing by or through electoral processes their choice. That was the extension of Section 41. Again, Section 41 did not exist in the 2006 Electoral Act.
Sure.
So,
now, for the sake of clarity, this Section 41,
yes,
in brief, what does it say?
Insists that no person shall be returned as a governor except he participated in every stage of the electoral process.
Okay.
From registration,
so
to voters card, to nomination.
So
to
the Amechi right to power
was settled there.
there.
In addition to the fine lines of the Supreme Court judgment.
So it won't happen again?
It will not. As a matter of fact, even pre-election matters.
Yeah.
Pre-election matters. You cannot even go to court except you're a candidate
Of the party.
A candidate of the party is not a nominee, and so on and so forth. But let's deal with the issue at hand. It is that Section 241 of the Electoral Act has clearly, 143 of the Electoral Act, 143, has clearly established the principle that whoever is returned as the governor of a state, and in respect of which position a petition was instituted and overturned, such a person shall continue to remain in office, expressly so, as the governor, provided whoever intends to contest that files an appeal within 21 days from the date of the delivery of that judgment or the reversal of that victory.
Yeah.
Now, generally under the law, in short, I knew this even when I was a student, because taking my university to court, they rushed to Court of Appeal and brought a notice of appeal. The way we engaged them was to insist that a notice of appeal is not a stay. The mere fact that you filed a notice of appeal does not operate as a stay against the judgment of the court. But here we have, like I say, it's an incremental progress.
Okay.
Once you file
it becomes a stay.
It becomes a stay. It operates as a stay. That is the express position of the law.
That's an improvement?
It's an improvement.
Okay.
Well, it's an improvement to deal with the exigency of our peculiar experiences.
Okay.
I'm sure you will be. Yes, it's of course. For instance, how did we come into the time bracket of 180 days?
Yes.
I mean, election petitions at the trial level, that is at the tribunal, must be completed within 180 days. Don't forget, this particular tribunal had 7 days more left before they hit
because
that.
A lot of time was wasted in the process of not allowing them to inspect and all of that.
If they did nothing within that time bracket, you would have as well bidded bye-bye to those whole processes. In the same vein, if you're going to appeal, and if you indeed appeal, you have maximum of 60 days. It applies at the Court of Appeal, it applies in the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Don't forget, you don't used to have Supreme Court litigating over governorship or House of Reps or Legislative Assembly election petitions, except for the innovations and except for the presidential and vice presidential elections. Now, to deal and capture all of this within one particular picture is to insist that yes, whoever you are going to insist must conclude his petition within 180 days or 60 days in appellate court also has a constitutional right under Section 241 of the Constitution to appeal. That's a constitutional right. So as you moderate his right, you must also have recourse to his bigger rights. Because in law, we say that if that superior, if any other law runs foul of the express provisions of the Constitution, by section of 173, that other law, that other subsidiary law, will be null and void to the extent of that inconsistency. But why are all of these coming up? It is because we have our own peculiar experiences.
Yes, this is what Clem spoke about earlier.
Chris Ngige, enjoyed the office of the governor of Anambra State for 3.5 years. Less than 6 months before the expiration of the time, before the matter was resolved. So how do you now deal with such situation? Having in mind the fact also that as lawyers, if you moved too far, we will raise an objection challenging the disposition of that particular judge to grant us our fair hearing. Fair hearing insists that I must have sufficient time
to respond.
In short, I must have the convivial environment to respond.
Thank you very much, Malaki. We knew we'd get this overview when you were here. Reference has been made to, and you did also, Clem, I'm coming back to you now, reference has been made to the will of the people. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, we go to the whole expense and trouble of an election. It's to get the will of the people for a given project. It might be a state governorship, whatever, it might be the country. And that is what we've seemed to be battling with. The will of the people against the will of some who are desperate enough to try all sorts of maneuvers to thwart the will of the people.
I mean, he has elucidated.
Yes, it's now left to the courts, unfortunately,
to be arbiters.
To become arbiters. What we want is we want to go out like anybody in the world, cast my vote, go back home, wait for it to be counted, and the Nigerian factor plays out that. In between casting your vote and the counting of it, there's so much that can be done, which shouldn't be so. And this is what led you to probably, suggest that governance in Rivers State has been totally absent from day one.
That is my contention. Even before and during and since then.
It's incontrovertible.
Since then. So this is not taking sides with either the Peter side or Nissan Wike. It is the people that are suffering. When you see the amount of poverty, some demonstration took place last week, and I looked at the people that were demonstrating, and I said, these people are alienated. So the youth unemployment, poverty, things like that are happening. And what is happening is that the will of the people has not been allowed to prevail in one form or the other. And what we're getting is people are complaining. And of course, then they are reference to other factors, which I don't want to bring in here today, because the people that were demonstrating over other issues. But really, the issue is that the will of the people had not prevailed. And there's a story. I don't want to muddy the waters. People like Malanke, they've been on the field on this human rights thing. When you look at the Constitution of Nigeria and say, we the people, but there were no we the people. When that Constitution was promulgated into law. That has been one of the fundamental flaws of some of the things we are doing. I know Goodluck Jonathan, he tried to see how he could panel beat some of those things by calling the National Conference and the rest of it. But sovereignty, in a constitutional democracy, sovereignty belongs to the people. It is their right to choose their leader periodically. It's their right to say, we don't want you again. Even if you are an excellent leader. I mean, Winston Churchill was renowned to be a very good leader. The people said, thank you very much. You led us through the war. We want to try somebody else.